Hello and welcome inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 690, the Styrian Grand Prix review. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camera. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
Exactly what I need you to do. You know why we do these race review podcasts. You know how we do them.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about
That's
it.
exactly
Come on, Todd.
what we do. We watch one, we talk about it. But before I talk about it, I have to go all the way down south to the Dallas-Fort Worth area where he plies his skills as the guru of motorsport. That's really all you need to know. Well, that in his name.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
That's what you know him as. He sometimes allows me to call him Paul. Paul, how you doing?
I am sweating my whatsits off, sweating my Alonso's off right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Aye. Alonso's.
Yes, it is hot, my friend.
Yeah, it's a little hot down there. You're closer to the equator, Paul.
Is that what it is?
I know, it's what they tell me, man. I'm no scientist, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I just know like San Diego is 72. That's isn't that like equidistant from the equator?
Well, like San Diego is like the city with the most perfect weather in America.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
We don't have that in Texas, just letting you know.
No.
Yeah,
It's
like
all that fresh.
105.
Is it? It's all that
Yeah.
fresh Gulf air. It's that moisture just seeping up from the rainforest. You know?
From San Padre Island, from the teenagers partying there. That's what I'm smelling.
Or
right
Galveston with the oil lumps on your shoes.
There you
know?
go.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it's perfect. Man. It's great. Paul, did you manage to get the Styrian Grand Prix? Is that in Kent? Where is that?
Yeah, it's just east of Kent.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's
good.
on the outskirts, some say.
The Kentish Empire, really.
Right. The rolling hills where they speak German. They see, Second World War, they tried to get to Kent, through Dover, and they didn't
Right.
quite get there. But just east of there, there's a little place called Styria where they kind of set up shop and didn't have to leave.
Right. Well, it was you enterprising British folk that invented that radar that prevented him, getting over the cliffs of Dover, if you will.
Yes, important stuff.
And very important stuff. So, I'm thinking at this point, Kent owes me. They should be sponsoring this podcast. I know all the British listeners like, dude, you
Because
didn't
of all the
discover
mistruths
Kent.
of Kent, you're saying people are like quitting their jobs and moving to Kent to this new,
I know.
Xanadu type of place, and they end up in
Exactly.
Maidstone. They're like,
Exactly.
this isn't what I was.
If I ever get to Kent, I'm going to place an American flag there. I discovered Kent. It's great. To all of you listeners in Kent, it's a beautiful place, and we've had a lot of fun at your expense. But keep up the good Kent work.
Well, the Charleslys are from Kent, so there you go.
Need I say more? If Kent can produce people like you, Paul, done.
Done. Yep.
Speaking of done, we have a Styrian Grand Prix to review.
Yes, we do.
Should we do that?
Yeah,
Let's
let's
do
do
that.
it.
All right.
Yeah,
So for
fun.
those of you
Seems like we
watching,
just did this last week. Sure, we're
yeah,
not
this
repeating?
is like deja vu, man.
Yeah, it's weird.
Just different Mercedes driver one. So so anyway, let's we talked about the track last week, and same rules apply. So if you listen to the podcast review from last week, that would be podcast number 689. I was recording from remote locations. Apologies. I will be doing again next week, so apologies in advance. But what I did want to talk to you about is not necessarily the intricacies of the track, which we covered, but let's talk about qualifying a little bit. We had a lot of heavy rain, and so what we saw last weekend was the cars in dry weather qualifying trim. We had a lot of attrition, a lot of mechanical issues that cropped up last week, impacted possibly the qualifying performance, definitely the race performances. But what we saw this weekend was a really damp and raining session, which gave us our first look of the 2020 cars in wet weather configuration or trim. What stood out to you other than Lewis's incredible lap? He was at 1.2 seconds ahead of everybody, from that lap, which is terrific.
Yeah.
But what caught your eye car-wise, team-wise, in that wet qualifying?
Well, the Ferraris evidently can't put the power down for anything. That's for sure. Wow. They really stunk up the wet stuff. Whether they got engine power or not, they still couldn't put the power down on the ground. That was pretty bizarre. Yeah, it was interesting to me how some drivers try those alternate lines and some don't. I think that's definitely something you would always try. In those last two turns, you can't, because you go offline. It really, the angle of attack into that turn is so far outweighs what you gain from traction versus what you gain from having a better line through the turn. So it was interesting to see how some of the drivers were hunting for grip in different places, which certainly is something I would be trying to do. And
I
some
loved
just
watching Max. He was hunting for grip everywhere.
And Leclerc too, but he was hunting
Yeah.
for grip in a straight line also. But it's tough. These track long, fast turns in the rain. They're the ones that will catch you out pretty fast.
Yeah.
And once it goes wrong, it goes very wrong, right? You kind of get yourself committed into the turn, and it's either going to stick or it's not. So I think there was a lot less mistakes than I expected to be in a track like that in the rain. So I think everyone did a pretty good job. But definitely some cars showed up that they like the Racing Point also, that they don't have the wet stuff figured out yet for sure.
Yeah,
but,
right.
Definitely Lewis. I really wanted to sit in that lap from what Lewis did, because being just over a second is something in the rain, but doing it at a track that's barely over a minute long is something even more special. But
Right.
I haven't been able to jump in the car and see what he did, but quite a massive gap between him and the rest of the field.
It was huge. That was a type of performance that you normally saw from this guy.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. Senna, sorry, for those of you listen only, I did a visual there. I pointed at my Senna poster on the wall.
I think everyone knew, even if you didn't have to see a picture.
Yeah, right. Right. So, yeah.
Ronnie Peterson, he was pretty handy in the rain.
Yeah. You know, there was another guy. This guy.
Yeah.
That's now, if you're just listening only, I'm pointing at my Michael Schumacher artwork on the wall. So, yeah, he was good at that, too.
He wasn't too bad.
Yeah, he's kind of handy. So, yeah, how are you in the rain, Paul? Were you a handy rain driver?
I'm pretty handy rain driver, yeah. Because you have to be adaptable, right? You have to look ahead. You have to surmise what's going on the previous lap to know what you can take out of the car the next lap, where to be. You have to be, really have a strategy for where you need to be. And sometimes it can be fairly bizarre. I remember being at Sebring on the back session, the switchbacks at Sebring, and just literally driving straight for the wall and having to drive off of it because I knew that's where all the grip was, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be very creative, but the creativeness can really pay off. So yeah, I've always said my weakness is qualifying, but rain was not one of my weaknesses. I don't think.
Yeah. Well, it was super cool. I even texted you. I said, man, I love watching Max hunt for grip. And he was taking some really creative lines. It just, but we've seen that from Max. And Max just has this innate ability to find that grip. And like you said, Leclerc was looking for it too. And it's not that Lewis or Valtteri didn't, but they don't have to in that Mercedes.
Yeah.
They're just, the greasy line, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the race, the Styrian Grand Prix. So last week, the Austrian Grand Prix, this time recognized in the Steiermark region of Austria, which is just stunningly beautiful. And every year, hats off to all of you Austrians out there. You just manage to provide a postcard every time we go there from Formula One. It's just beautiful. The Styrian Grand Prix finished with Mercedes on top. Perhaps no surprise there. Lewis Hamilton in P1, Valtteri Bottas in P2. After a terrific qualifying session, which we just mentioned, Lewis really shook off the penalties from last week that relegated him to fourth. This time, he took that pole position all the way to a win with a measured and controlled drive as he had pace in pocket and easily kept Max Verstappen behind him. With the pace and delta to Max, Lewis didn't really need to use much of the curbs that they were concerned about. It seems that Mercedes were able to remove that risk from that sensor and gearbox curb issue, vibration issue they were having last week. At least we didn't hear anything or any warnings to the drivers from the team during that time. But Paul, not taking anything away from Lewis, he certainly looked fantastic on Saturday, came to the race on Sunday, looked terrific again, measured race, and it was in some ways impressive, great win, but it made me sad because it was so dominant.
I mean, the gap didn't really show that most of the race. you know, because Max was kind of there or thereabouts, right? I mean,
Around
within
5 seconds or so.
but
Yeah.
but Lewis wasn't using any of the car to keep him there,
No.
and at any moment, you know, and I think Max knew that and probably trying as hard as he could to do it. Luckily for Lewis, he was unchallenged by his teammate because his teammate didn't have a great wet qualifying session, so he really had a cushion that he could play with. And I don't know if the team did or didn't have the same issues, but I don't think if they did, they would be squawking them over the radio anyway at this point to show weakness. So obviously, with a week left to chat about it, I think they've probably got a protocol in there to talk about, or just drive with that issue from the outset so they don't have to bring in some kind of change in driver standard during the race. But I don't think they would be squawking about it like they did the first weekend, just to kind of keep the other teams on their toes a little bit.
Right. Good point. Valtteri, he started down in fourth, so he had ground to make up. And after setting a few fastest laps early on, he pulled Sainz into his clutches for a pass, got around him. Bottas ran long, though, on his first stint. This is interesting because the strategy that Mercedes had at hand for this race was dominating, too. So they were able to run him long on that first stint. That gave him fresher tires at the end. Then he set about running Max down at that point. Max was kind of a sitting duck. Bottas got around him, finished second place, a very handy position. Had Bottas qualified better, could have possibly given Lewis a little bit of a run for his money, but as such, he had to make up some ground, get around Max. The team said the gearbox issues seemed to be fixed, and the suspension concerns that they had heading into the weekend weren't 100% cured, but they didn't play any part in Sunday's race. A clear 1-2 from Mercedes, a return to form, you might say.
Yeah, the newly signed Bottas. Right?
Well, that's what the rumors have it. I haven't seen anything official from Mercedes at the time of recording this podcast, but I did see the article you're referencing.
Yeah. Usually that stuff doesn't come up without some kind of good way to find it, because everyone's hoping Vettel might sign for Mercedes. I don't think that's...
Yeah, I didn't see that happening, but I was curious if George Russell might get the call up, but no, it didn't seem like it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, how can they, it's really hard, because I mean, how can you judge against Bottas right now?
He just won a race.
He won a race. He's doing what we always say that number two needs to do, right?
That's
when the number one falters, if you want to call them number one, number two, I know they won't call each other that, but that's kind of how everyone starts off the season as, depending on how things roll out. But
he's Lewis's wingman.
Yep, he's gonna win the races when Lewis can't, and be right behind Lewis when Lewis can. So right now, that I can't see them, you know. Plus, if they want to re-sign Lewis, why bring in someone that Lewis may perhaps not really want to be a teammate with?
Good point.
So I think it's probably a foregone conclusion at this point. I was thinking there might be a change, but maybe not. But Bottas did a good job. He managed his tires. He had a great car underneath him for that last stint. Max obviously had a little bit of damage. I'm not sure how much that affected his pace in that last half of the race, but either way, I don't think the Red Bull had anything for the Mercedes, and Bottas was able to get by a couple of people and then just kind of consolidate his point lead at this point. So that was good for him.
Yeah, it's good. Red Bull, Alex Albon P4, Max Verstappen P3. Max started second, but as hard as he tried, he just couldn't match the pace of the Merc and slowly drifted backwards to around, like I said, 4 or 5 seconds, where Lewis then controlled his pace and kept the distance static from that point on. Bottas eventually reeled him in as he was on fresher tires and made the pass for second. And Max did all he could there, but there just wasn't enough pace in that car to keep Mercedes frosty at all. Max, driving his guts out, and I think you could hear his frustration on the radio with some of the comments that he made. He just, it's so difficult, Paul, to be in that car, to being a team or the team that everyone feels is at this point the only one that could possibly take a fight on this shorter circuit, their home track. It's got to be frustrating for Max just to have nothing in the tank.
Yeah, I mean, they've had good fortune on this track. I don't know, is that they've been the car for the track, oddly enough, but they have had a turn of fortune. So whatever it is in the track, I don't think it's a Red Bull track. But yeah, he took everything he could, took the car on his shoulders and took it as far as he could. It was fun to see him repass Bottas. That
Yeah.
took something, because there's a risk in that.
Yeah.
A guy with better tires and to outbrake him and repass him on the outside. Obviously, he wasn't expecting that. That was a bit of fun. I think Max doesn't enjoy the plodding races where he just kind of starts second, finishes second, and whatever. So I think he just did that to kind of spice his day up a little bit. So that was cool. That was fun to see anyway, right? This wasn't as an exciting or dramatic race, at least maybe until the last lap, as the previous race. So it was nice for Max not to give up. It's good to do that because it always keeps your opponent on their toes. Not necessarily that this was really going to game him anything, but in the future, who knows? The other opponent is always going to be wary, even if they get past Max, that he may just come straight back at them, and that can give him an advantage too, just having that kind of thought in their head.
Yeah, right. It's a good point. For Alex, he drifted off the pace of the leaders, including his teammate, and looked to be running to a lonely fourth place until he was caught by Sergio Perez in a racing point, no less, that seemed to find amazing speed on par with the Merc late in the race. Alex held his station as Perez tried to pass, and the two banged wheels with the Mexican getting the worst of it, allowing Alex to continue on to fourth. But it just it kind of befuddled. Alex was saying all weekend really that his car, he's struggling with his car in the slow speed or at the apex. He had a couple of good moves though on Ocon and Sainz early on. He just wasn't comfortable or at least capable of matching Max's speed, which is actually kind of what he's expected to do. And this weekend he just wasn't delivering. And then on the balance of a Red Bull, I just felt that Mercedes had more strategic options, really, unlike last week when Max started on the different tires. This time he was on the same compound, so they just didn't have a lot of tactical strategy up their sleeve to even really make a chance. But yeah, I'm not sure what was really causing Alex to be as off the pace as he seemed to be last week.
Yeah, I was reading the reports from Red Bull and Christian Horner and everything. And it seemed like they're kind of leaning on Alex for his lack of pace there. But they were saying he had a very quick car for the last half of the race, or he was driving on pace in the last half of the race, tire corrected. Obviously, Perez had some nice fresh tires and attacked him. But his pace is much better on lighter fuel loads than heavier, and that they need to work through the issues that he's having with the car. So it seems more like they're saying it's kind of a driver-induced issue. I don't know if that's true or not. Obviously, one car to the next, different driver likes different things. I'm not sure that's 100% what it is, but I think he's still doing a good job. And yeah, it must have been deja vu all over again when he felt that bump from Perez in exactly the same spot as Lewis. Good God, he must. He's a fighter for sure, and he'll keep that car on the outside. And by doing that, he actually, got a better result than probably he was going to get without the contact, right? Perez was going to be by him. But that contact kind of knocked Perez out of the deal, but Perez had him pretty much. So by fighting for that position, he had a bit of turn of luck where he didn't end up with a flat tire, but that kind of having that fighting spirit kind of bought him that fourth place finish.
Yeah, for sure. McLaren, Carlos Sainz in P9, Lando Norris P5. It is an interesting day for McLaren with Carlos running well until that long pit stop, Paul. That just, that pretty much scuttled his race from that point on. When you're running at that towards the sharp end, having a long stop like that is just tough to recover from. That put him in the midfield. And then he had to let Lando through because Lando was on fresher tires. So McLaren made the right call there. So I couldn't argue with that. Lando had fresher tires. Carlos did manage to get the fastest lap award. And so far, McLaren has all of the fastest laps on offer in 2020 at this point. I was intrigued that Max didn't get that point when he stopped after Carlos late in the race, though, for soft tires. And Carlos held on to that.
Well, they brought him out in the middle of a big pack of cars.
It did, yeah. But once he got through those, I thought maybe he could get that fast lap, but it didn't happen.
Maybe that little bit of damage, he just didn't have that little extra. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, they did bring him out in a gaggle, that's for sure.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, that was just a tough situation for Carlos to recover from.
Yeah.
But they made the right call letting Lando through.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was tough. That midfield battle was tight, and there's a lot of cars in it, so you lose, a little bit of time in the pit lane, and there's a lot of cars now between you and where you were going to be, right? And that really compromised him. It's good to see that the McLaren team, at least, are doing what all the teams should do, at least the ones that are chasing the Mercs, and working together and not, sitting there behind someone for 3 laps and letting them by. It was literally as Lando caught Carlos, the wave by was done. So that's good teamwork from the drivers, and hopefully, Norris will be able to repay Sainz for that at a later date. But that's exactly what a team needs to do to get those results. And if they hadn't have done that,
that's right.
Norris would have been in 7th, not in 5th, for sure.
Yep.
So yeah, hats off to McLaren for making that call and having that strategy before the race, and having the whole team on that same mindset that it's all about where the cars end up at the end of the race, whether it be one driver or the next, and both of them having their day eventually to take advantage of that thing.
Yeah, it's just, I couldn't agree more. And it just goes to show you, Paul, and as you know, as a sporting director for a racing team at IMSA, I mean, it's those fine little details. Just as simple as putting the gun on, changing a wheel nut, having to reset the gun. And it just, cost him 3-4 seconds, whatever it might been, just, your race is up in smoke at that point. And that's the level that Mercedes is operating on. And it's good to see McLaren taking that serious and, like you said, making those instant strategy calls. I'm sure Andreas Seidel will ferret out the details on that wheel gun and figure out what's going on there. But those are the differences between podiums and not, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So Lando, he had that 3-place grid penalty he had to recover from, and he did so by passing Ricciardo, Stroll, and Perez on the last lap to come home 5th in truly an inspired race from the young man. Despite that terrific result from Lando and more points for Carlos, it does look like Racing Point are going to give McLaren a serious run for their money as best of the rest. And that means that there can't be more mistakes, such as the one Lando had on Saturday, or such as the one that the team had on Carlos during the pit stop. And Sergio, had he not damaged his wing, Lando very much probably would have finished behind the Racing Points in 5th. So to your point, Paul. So yeah, Lando had to make it happen, and to his credit, he did. Yeah,
he did. It was as I said, Sainz and the team put him in that position, but he took full advantage of it too. That was quite a he's making it fun for sure out there. It's going to be a tight battle between these two teams. I think Racing Point has a faster car, but maybe McLaren, apart from obviously the Sainz issue in the pit lane, maybe would have a bit of an advantage on their strategy and how they play a race and how they go about their weekend. I can see, obviously we're seeing Norris and Sainz working well together. I'm not so sure we'll see Stroll and Perez work as well together in the same manner. But I mean, McLaren, they looked nearly nowhere, pretty close to the end of the race, and somehow the strategy worked, and Norris never gave up and pushed every single time he was out there and took advantage of nailing Perez, right? And Perez made the mistake, gave him the opportunity, and he took it with both hands for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of Racing Point, Sergio Perez in P6, Lance Stroll in P7. Racing Point had a tough qualifying in the rain. I was a little surprised by that, Paul. They really looked to be nowhere in the rain. And Perez and Stroll started in 17th and 13th, respectively. Perez all the way back in 17th. I thought, wow, okay. So based on last week's performance, maybe they're sort of in the midfield-ish towards the front. But given this wet weather performance, they really struggled. Now, they had a lot of ground to make up during the race. They set about passing their way up through the field with incredible pace. Sergio passed Stroll really first. Then he overtook Ricardo and was running down Albon for fourth when he drove on the inside and had understeer clipping Alex's rear tire and damaging his front wing. And this left him in the clutches of Lando on the last corner where he lost fifth place. So, I don't know. It's to me as a racing incident. He went for it. Looked like he did have, tried to a little bit of outbraked himself going into that, banged wheels a little bit. Unfortunately, lost that front wing, but was able to limp it over the finish line and claim P6.
Yeah, it was. I think he had a fantastic race. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that little incident with Albon, that was a little black mark on it, but the speed he had, the longevity he had on the tires to make the strategy work again,
Yeah.
I mean, and just the pace he was showing at the end. I mean, considering where they started, yeah, they were nowhere in the wet, and that's really bad. That's not something. That's something they're going to have to fix, because you're going to have some other wet qualifying races, etc. You don't want to be nowhere in the rain races. But I had confidence that they were going to make some good inroads, and they did. That and then some. That car is very, very handy, honestly.
Yeah.
But I think once again, Perez just showed he's got some magic with those tires. And then when he was able to get on the softer tire, the newer tire, he could unleash the speed as well, which he's capable of too. So I think it was an exemplary drive by him, and it's a shame he didn't get the result that drive deserved, really.
Yeah. And it wasn't a bad weekend for Lance either. He was out. He had some elbows going on with Ricardo. He just ran out of laps. He nearly beat Sergio due to the Mexicans' damaged front wing there at the last corner as they stormed down the straight to the finish line. It was really a photo finish, but
Didn't it look like they was holding up a little bit?
yeah.
I thought he was holding up and letting Perez get the position, but then you had who was off to the right. Sainz was on the inside there as well. Ricardo. And I was like, oh man, this is not going to work out well. Luckily that finish line is pretty close as you come around there, but I thought they were trying to do it in sync, and I was like, man, there's no place to do that at all.
Yeah.
Very close for sure.
Yeah, very close. Now, the pace of the Racing Point was terrific. So much so, folks, that Renault have formally filed a complaint at the end of the race over Racing Point's brake duct design, arguing that they are simply using Mercedes' design from 2019. Now, the FIA have impounded those parts of the car and asked Mercedes for their 2019 brake ducts as well in order to investigate, and if found guilty, they may lose this P6 and P7 result. Now, the interesting part of that also is this investigation may take some time. So all of the race performances that happen until they render a judgment are subject to possibly being lost if they're found guilty of this. Now, the team very bullish in saying this is completely unfounded, and they're going down the wrong path, and this is ridiculous. Of course, you would expect them to say that. It'll be interesting to see also, Paul, what the teams have to prove is that there is a list of parts that they can buy from Mercedes and do get from Mercedes.
Mm-hmm.
But there are things also that can't just be wholesale taken, like brake ducts, right?
Right.
Or a chassis. So the point here is that Renault feel that they've identified a part on that car that pretty much is a carbon copy of Mercedes. Right. And if that's the case, they could run afoul of the regulations, sporting regulations.
Yeah, it's interesting because that with the evolution of the cars during a season, they had many brake ducts on those cars.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they pick which one. Different
right.
tracks choose different ones. I don't know. Maybe they go back to the Austrian Grand Prix duct. Is that what they're thinking they were going to do? Obviously, Cyril's a bit of a grudge man, isn't he? Because obviously, Racing Point got Renault thrown out. I don't know what race was it for, something about their start line procedures or something. I can't remember now, but they've been waiting to get back at them and probably searching constantly to try and find something that they can pin on Racing Point. And maybe they found something with the brake ducts. Hard to say what they have and what they don't have, but So we'll have to wait and see on that.
You know what I'll be interested to see, Paul, is if this is the only formal complaint that is filed against them for the balance of the season.
You think people are just going to keep stabbing at him?
I'm curious, if Renault doesn't win this brake duct issue, will other teams or Renault find other reasons to file formal complaints against this team? You have to admit, this team, the difference between last year's performance compared to Mercedes and this year is markedly different.
Staggering. Yes, it is.
So there's got to be some way that these other teams may continue to pummel away and chip away at Racing Point during the season. So I wouldn't say this is the first and last formal complaint. It would not surprise me if there are future ones.
No, you'd wonder if there's a point where the FISA quit. If they find something, you can't just have teams constantly barraging the Racing Point folks for this part or that part. It's like you're just kind of grabbing at straws at that point.
Right.
Maybe they've got something in a brake duct. I don't know. It might be something they thought they could get away with and they didn't. But hopefully they didn't, because I like the fact, I like the whole theory behind it. I think it's good. It makes the teams more competitive and gives them, and not having to spend millions of dollars on things that make them slower. I don't mind the concept of it at all, but
well, you have to wonder though also, Paul, if you're Renault, you're thinking we're spending millions and millions, and this Garagista, this little team comes in and they're blowing our doors off.
Yeah, I mean that's upsetting, right? Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're looking, okay, is it that this truly is a carbon copy of Mercedes just painted pink? Or what the hell is going on, Cyril? Right. At some point.
I mean, it's true. I mean, you can understand that point, I guess. But
sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Renault. You had Esteban Ocon, a DNF, Daniel Ricciardo, a P8. As Ocon and Ricciardo were on different strategies, Dan was running right at the back of Ocon early on, and yet it just seemed to me, this is just my personal opinion, it took him way too long to reverse that order. It cost, in my opinion, it cost Dan a heck of a lot of time and track position. And eventually he got around him. Did Dan have to do a legit pass to get around him, or did the team actually then radio and reverse the order? I don't know, but it's a shame because the Australian may have had more. May have been able to make more out of this day than P8 if they had, called that, like you said, that McLaren did instantly. Had they called that knowing that they were on different strategies and let Dan immediately through, he could have finished higher in the order. And that's I don't know. But Ocon ended up retiring with cooling issues, which is the same thing Ricciardo had a week ago. That's concerning enough for Renault. But regardless, Dan got around him. He drove a terrific race, was looking at 5th place, holding off Stroll, but he eventually gave way and then nearly had both of them beat at the drag. It was like a drag race. They're down on that final lap of the finish line as they went down with Perez struggling and Stroll, like you said, seeming to almost hesitate there. Dan on a drag race nearly got both of them there at the end. It was tough. But with the third fastest time, I was wondering if Renault had made a significant step with their power unit this weekend, but I don't know. It didn't seem like it. It seemed like the Racing Points had them well in hand. Was the strategy difficult? Did that hold Dan back enough that it cost him losing those places for Racing Point? I don't know. This is all speculation on my part. Yeah,
I mean, one thing on Renault is I'm actually encouraged by their pace in general so far. Yeah. Better than maybe I thought they would be. Yeah, we got the Racing Point. They've kind of thrown a real wrench in things and churn things up a little bit. But when you look at where they were last year, I think they're actually better than I thought they were going to be. Certainly from what they were saying before the season where, well, we just got this car to get us through a year before the new car came out, which obviously we know that now changed and now this car has to last them 2 years, right?
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is better.
Yeah, it's definitely better. Absolutely. I mean, as soon as Dan got behind Ocon, they should have let him go. That's exactly what we were saying. Yeah. You sit behind someone for 2-3 laps and, okay, now let him by. Yeah. It's like, it's too late. There's too tight up there. You got to work as a team. You got to work in fluid motion. And if he's catching him and he's caught him, he deserves, if you want your team to do the best it can do and get the teams the best result, if he had done that, he absolutely would have been fifth down the road. I mean, you got to drive the strategy with the tire strategy, etc., and you got to make the most of it. But when you get stuck behind your teammate for 3 laps, they can throw everything out, and then therefore his tires were more worn and he wasn't able to fight as hard.
Yeah,
so I think they really kind of ruined his strategy for a much better result for him and the team by not calling that as soon as it happened.
Yeah, I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what Cyril was thinking, but I know Dan's leaving the team.
No one does. He's so provocative.
That's exactly right.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
I don't know what he's thinking.
No.
And
or what he's saying, really, technically.
Right. No, I don't know. And I'm not saying this is what he's thinking, but I know Dan's leaving the team and Ocon's your guy. But who cares about this? This is about getting the team the best possible finish they can get, regardless if it's Dan or Esteban. It doesn't matter. So leaving Dan out there, maybe you're upset that Dan's leaving. Maybe he's ticked off about it. I get all that. But he's clearly on a different strategy, has a faster car, and you want Renault finishing as high as possible. So let him go, regardless if you're mad at him, Yep. And I'm not saying that's what happened.
Yeah.
But why else would you have held him that long?
Yeah, I mean, those things happen sometimes.
Yeah.
You'd think they wouldn't, but they do, and they're like, oh, let's let Ocon, show Dan what he can do, and that's because Ocon's our guy now. So give him some, confidence for the rest of the season. Those kind of things do happen on the pit wall.
If that was going through Cyril's head, then, dude, you weren't thinking team,
Right.
You have to use the resources you have available at the time to do the best result you can.
Yep, and Dan's not a guy that's going to be playing against your team when he's driving for your team. When he's done at the end of the season, he's going to be against you. But from this point, Dan Ricciardo is there to get the best result for him and therefore the team that he's associated with.
It's exactly right, because Dan's a professional. He's not going to be phoning it in. He's there to get the best result he can as a race car driver. And he had a car that could have done more, I think. I hate to get on a rant about this, and I'm sorry, Cyril, but, if Dan is flying, you got to let him fly, regardless if you're ticked off and he's leaving or not. Let's see. Esteban, we talked about that. Let's go to AlphaTauri. Daniel Kvyat, P10, Pierre Gasly, and P15. Both Alphas had a good qualifying in the wet, and Gasly, he was having a terrific weekend, Paul. Started in the top 10, made it into Q3. I thought, wow, Pierre is just really showing that, if Alex isn't the guy at Red Bull, I am, really recovering, a good weekend. But he had some initial contact early on with Ricciardo on that opening lap. And, I don't know how much damage. I think they suspect there was enough there to really hinder his pace. But he drove in the top 10 for his first stint. And I thought, okay, maybe that damage isn't that catastrophic. He was running in P10. But when he changed those hard tires, Paul, that pace just seemed to really evaporate. He drifted backwards so much that the team switched him to a two-stopper. That didn't pay dividends at all. Really unfortunate, because I thought he was heading for a really good weekend.
Yeah, it was. It was a struggle in the end. It was a shame. That team's kind of right on that little edge where it can be good and bad, and fighting for the top 10, for sure. And I think on a good day, it's going to be fighting for a 6th or 5th place still. But it was unfortunate to see that. And as late as they made that call for the tires, he was done anyway. There was no way he was going to be able to fight through that melee of cars ahead of him and get any kind of result at all. So I'm not sure. I guess you do it just to appease the driver and give him something nice to drive.
Get him comfortable.
But it was never going to make a difference in the result.
Yeah. For Daniel, Danny, he redeemed himself from that DNF last week, not of his own making. That wasn't his fault, but he did redeem himself, got some points. He ends up slotting into P10 instead of Pierre. Good result for him. Both the cars seriously lack pace to do anything more than that. So I think for Danny, I think he felt pretty good, P10, to take a point away for the team. So that's good. But
is that their first point of the season? I can't remember the results from last week.
Yeah, neither. Good grief.
Well, we know Danny wasn't in the results.
No, he was out. He was DNF.
Oh no, I think he did. Yeah, because I think he was in 7th or something last time. It was Gasly, something like that.
Right, right. So anyway, that's how they finished. The other Alfa Romeo, Kimi Räikkönen P11, Antonio Giovinazzi in P14. Antonio had a 5-place grid penalty at the start for a late gearbox change, so he had a lot of ground to make up. Although he had that poor qualifying, he was already prepared to start the back, so it didn't really matter. And so he struggled trying to make it back up from the back of the grid in P14. Just not a lot to report home about, Paul.
No, well, the best of the Ferrari teams, even though they don't have a Ferrari engine in it. But I think, struggle. I mean, their struggles will go along with Ferrari's struggles, except even further back, right? It's tough right now for anyone with a Ferrari motor in it right now. So I'm not sure what they can do to get themselves out of it, but they're mired in the back of the midfield for sure. Yeah,
well, then with Kimi, they tried to run that real long first stint. I think he went the longest of anyone's on mediums, but he came out behind Giovinazzi and then was promptly let through quickly on fresher tires. They're making the right call again. Ultimately, just poor qualifying left them both too much space to make up, and they did manage to fight with those around them. So that's, good. They fought each other, but they couldn't really compete for 10th place, unfortunately.
Yeah, just so much you can do with a wet sponge, really.
Haas, F1.
Speaking of wet sponges.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Kevin Magnussen, P12, Romain Grosjean, P13. Haas managed to get both cars to the end of the race, but not in the points, despite it being a better weekend than last weekend. So if there is a positive, it was a better weekend than last weekend. Grosjean started from the pit lane. He actually did have a pretty good first lap, Paul. He worked his way up forward on that first lap. I thought it was a pretty good lap considering he started in the pit lane. Kevin Magnussen had a few tussles on track with the AlphaTauri. They were able to battle those around him, but lacked any sort of real pace really to advance any further up the field with any efficacy. The commentary that I listened to from Sky Sports seemed to imply that they were, again, on Sunday struggling with brake issues. And if that's true, I'm just not sure. That's what they struggled with last week, so one would think they opened up the cooling of those brakes for this weekend. The Sky commentary team seemed to say they were still struggling with brakes. I don't know what it's going to take for this team to get on top of their brake or tire issue.
I know, and before it was obviously they've been struggling a lot, certainly with Romain Grosjean driving the car with the brakes. I mean, that was a whole saga unto itself, wasn't it? Yeah, and we saw Grosjean had literally looked like a failure in qualifying, right, in the rain.
Yeah,
that was that wasn't a Grosjean area. That was literally a failure on the car. Right. And we saw something very similar in the race.
Yep,
I think. But yeah, this is no place to be having consistent issues with your brakes for sure. I don't know why they do that. Like year after year, but Magnussen doesn't usually have an issue. But I think it's really a team issue at this point. But maybe they tried to copy the Mercedes brakes and did a really bad job of it. I don't know, but
it could be.
It's a struggle for the Haas team right now. You don't have the best engine on the grid, and you struggle with the brakes. It's kind of leads you to the position they ended up in, right?
And don't have the best chassis on the grid either.
No.
Yeah. Williams.
But you don't need that because why?
Yeah.
I mean, you may have been able to develop the brakes if you tested, but why would you test? You don't need to do that.
You don't need to do that. I mean, it's an advantage, but not a big one.
That's not that big a deal.
All right, Williams. Williams F1. Russell P16. Latifi in P17. Russell started a terrific P11 and was really trying hard, Paul. you know, when you're up that far, sort of out of position in that car, and that race starts, man, you are trying everything just to hang in there, you know? And he really was. I felt bad for him. He wanted to run in that midfield in a car that really didn't have business running there. He was trying to hold off Magnussen, who was breathing down his neck on lap 4. Unfortunately, he ran wide through the gravel at turn 6. That sent him to the back in much more familiar territory, it must be said, at the back of the grid. So very unfortunate for him. I felt bad, Paul. He had such a good job, and he wanted to be there, but that car just wasn't going to let him stay there.
Yeah, it's weird because, I mean, honestly, in the practices and the qualifying, I mean, they're not that, they're certainly way closer than they have been, and they mixing that up a little bit in there too. But yeah, the race, it just didn't pan out for him. We know, I'm pretty confident Russell can get the best out of that car, but he wasn't able to get anything out of the car that could take him forward. Latifi's not doing a bad job. You know, his pace is fairly close to Russell's. So I think that's pretty good for him. I'm not expecting superstar heroics from him, but I think he's doing a decent job in that car. Unfortunately, a decent job will still get you last place.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, he had a couple ragged offs and stuff over the last 2 weekends, but I think, you know, this is just all seat time. You know, to be thereabouts with George Russell, I think that bodes well for him.
Yeah, I mean, George is a good benchmark, so at least he's got that to judge him by.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say that George is getting more out of that car probably than what it probably has a business doing, and that's a good sign too. So. Yep. All right.
That's the end of the podcast. Thank you.
Well, that's it for us.
Sorry. I thought we were done after Williams usually.
Sorry. No, we're going to talk about Ferrari. Oh. What can be said about Ferrari other than this, Paul?
I mean, it's always a big emotion.
It's a big emotion, all right.
Very big emotion.
Oh, boy. Well, you had 2 DNFs, Charles Leclerc DNF, Sebastian Vettel DNF. Ferrari brought a new floor and other upgrades that they fast-tracked based on last week's performance. And after all of that hard work by the folks back in Maranello, it ended with an aggressive move by Charles Leclerc that ended his and his teammates' race right at the start. Truly, unfortunately, Charles approached a busy third corner on the opening lap, tried to duck down the inside, almost hesitated, but then let go and went down into on the insides. Vettel was already getting squeezed into that corner by 2 other cars, and this left Leclerc clouding the back of Sebastian's car, ripping the German's rear wing off, damaging Charles's front wing. He boxed for a new front wing, fitted him with hard tires to go the distance, but later had too much damage to that brand new floor, I might add, and that ended both the drivers' race. Ferrari canceled their post-race press conference, and Leclerc, you know, hands up, took full responsibility for the actions, apologized, and said even an apologies isn't enough.
Right, I agree.
Paul, one side. Okay, I'm going to defend Charles here.
Really?
I am.
Good luck.
And everybody knows I've been with Seb 3 or 4 times, and he's a great guy, and I'm a huge Seb fan. But it must be said, one side of me says that all of that hate that people were shoving onto Sebastian's shoulders seems to be that's lost some of its sting now when Leclerc does things like this, right? So I'm saying, oh, okay, remember all that crap everybody was saying about Seb in Brazil? Well, what do you have to say now, right? Oh, however, having said that, I want to argue to the other side of that coin, which could be that you would expect this kind of thing from a young driver. Max did this several times when he was getting his chops, and you wouldn't expect this from a veteran like Sebastian. All right. So you could argue that, oh, okay, all right, fine. Leclerc screwed up. But you know what? It's his second year at Ferrari. Seb's a 4-time champion. You wouldn't expect this in Brazil like he did, but I kind of expect
He's
this.
the new Wunderkind.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I don't know what you're saying. I don't get it.
Well, it's a fair assessment, I think, but it will be intriguing to see how much patience a team like Ferrari has for junior mistakes like this. And having punted now, Sebastian, And, you know, they're putting another young guy in there. How much patience are they going to have for this, Paul?
Yeah, they're going to have a lot of patience. It was a bonehead, stupid move, but I don't think anyone at Ferrari are going to change their attitude towards Charles. I mean, it's what happens when the expectations are high and your car's performance is low. You get a little desperate, and obviously we've seen Seb do it several times.
Right.
Even when his car's been good, just desperate to get the result that he wants.
Right.
But it was a serious issue from what Charles. I mean, he just made a really bad rookie error there. I hope he learns from it completely. We always hear people say, "Oh, I did that, and I'll learn from it and bring it back." But I hope he really does learn a lot from that incident. There's no doubt the guy is the future of Ferrari, and he's got a lot of wins in his future as long as Ferrari can put a bloody engine in the back of that thing.
Right.
It's certainly not, the floor's not going to change their whole season. I know that. So yeah, it was just a stupid move. You can't explain it. You can't say, "Oh, well, maybe this, maybe that." He just made a really bad error. Don't do it again. I don't think they're going to hold it against him. It's going to ease a little bit of the pressure on Vettel for sure. But I don't think either of them have the time or the space to do these kind of things in the car they've got this year. They have to maximize. And last week, we saw that from Charles, right?
Right.
I mean, think of what he did last week. He got second place out of that thing, which is phenomenal. So this is a blip on his racing career with Ferrari, but I don't think Ferrari are going to make a big deal about it in any way. But and does Vettel feel better about it that Charles made the same mistake, kind of like what he did, maybe a bit worse? Not really. Yeah. Vettel's not going to take any smirks out of it either, because it took him out of the race too. So
yeah, he'd rather raced. Yeah.
Yep, they're all going to lick their wounds and go back and try and forget that bloody weekend. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, exactly. Out of the 88 total possible points these 2 weekends offered, Ferrari leave with Austria with 19. That's brutal. If you're going to mount any sort of...
Doesn't look like it's going to get that much better.
No, it doesn't. I'm going to be very intrigued to see this revamped Ferrari come Hungary. So this is going to be interesting. Maybe they'll show up with a pink Mercedes. Who knows?
Except for the brake dust. Don't make your own brake dust.
Yeah, make your own brake dust, or Cyril's going to be all over you.
Yeah,
like a herd of turtles.
Yep.
All right, let's give away some awards, because we tend to do this on Race Review Podcast. The first award we always hand out is Pass of the Race.
Woo! Yay! And the crowd go, yay!
And there was much rejoicing.
Much rejoicing.
All right, your Pass of the Race, Paul.
I'm going with Perez, who I believe it was on Carlos Sainz on the outside of turn 6, part of an awesome drive by Perez, and just the lead up to that pass was incredible. I thought how he was positioning himself and getting himself ready, and then passing on the outside of 6 is nearly impossible. Yeah. But he made it. He made it in. He got his car enough ahead where he stopped the opponent from being able to push out and push him out. It was an amazing pass, and just one of many great shows of Perez's skill during this race, I think.
Well, that's exactly right.
You like my face? You like it?
We do.
Sergio.
We definitely do. I liked when he radioed in, "Hey, how'd you like that?" It was great.
Although I told you that story when Paul Tracy said that, and then a lap later he crashed it into the barrier, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul Tracy.
Let's see. My pass of the race, I loved the Bottas Max battle, back and forth and repassing. I thought that was great. That was some fun passing to watch. That was just pure Max, man. That was awesome. Bottas got around him. Max comes right back, and fight him. You're not going to get around me that easy. And Bottas had to reline him up and do it again, in a dominant car. So
you can't put me down, copper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was good. All right. Well, the next award is always Donkey of the Race. All right, Paul. Donkey of the Race.
Sorry, I'm going to have to give it to Chuck LeDuc.
Me too. Not good. Charles. It's a rookie mistake.
But
You
he's not
know?
a rookie.
No, he's not.
His
And
third year.
no.
It was just a stupid mistake.
Yeah.
You can't give him that rookie excuse all the
No.
time.
No. Don't be a Danny.
I just want to smell one time.
Don't be that. All right. All right. Well, then finally it is driver of the race, Paul. Oh, yeah.
Get in there, Lewis.
Yes. All right, Paul. Who'd you have for driver of the race?
I'm giving it Sergio.
Double
award.
You like my face? You like it?
Yes, Paul
Yes,
loved
I
it.
do. I loved his race. I loved his race. The entire race. That one little blip, it was unfortunate. It cost him a lot, but up until that point, man, I that was my favorite part of the entire race, was watching Sergio drive, honestly.
Yeah, it was great. I absolutely. I think F1.com, they were voted driver of the race for sure. So I knew that because I was going to pick. I think Perez is an absolute shoo-in for driver of the race as well. But I knew that you were going to pick it, so I was going to try. I was going to try a little something different. Don't yell at me.
Stop yelling at Todd.
So I was just going to come up with something different. I'm going to give driver of the race to Lando Norris.
Nice.
I think he had that 3-place grid penalty, had to recover for that. Last week he did well. This week he comes in as a 3-place grid penalty, puts it all down, makes that great move on the last lap, takes a great position. Just a good weekend for Lando.
It's all that
He
sim
delivered.
practice. You see that happens in the
That's
sims.
it. It's all that Call of Duty, man. that
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
playing.
So no, it was a great last lap, and
Yeah.
he's a fun guy to watch. And
Yes.
luckily, McLaren's given him a car he can have fun with, so it's good.
Yes. All right. Let's see. We did get a nice comment from the mailbag.
You've got mail.
Well, that makes a
Mike.
change.
Yeah, it sure does. Instead of all the haterade I've been getting lately. Leave me alone, people. Just ask questions.
He's just one man.
I'm just one guy, man.
Yeah.
So, all right. Mike says this. It was just a comment. He said, hey, I just want to say before any seasonal controversy or issues or complaints I have, I am just flat out. I am so freaking thankful our sport has returned. Thank you. Carry on with decorum and civility. I agree with you, Mike.
I agree
with
too,
you.
Mike.
Yes, I agree.
I am very excited to. Now
Yes.
these races are going to come bang, 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 bang.
Yep. There's
And I'm going
lots-
racing too in a couple of weeks. And I'm
Yeah, you
excited
are.
about that.
Yes, excited about that. That's going to
Yeah.
be awesome. So yes, I am elated that racing is back. It's coming at us fast and furious. There's lots of other conversations, lots of other websites, lots of other podcasts discussing all of those really important things that everyone should be discussing and is discussing. I'm here to talk about the racing. That's what we do, and that's what we're going to talk about. So I'm elated. I'm right there with you, Mike. I'm excited. I loved seeing Sergio do what he did. Loved the qualifying effort by Lewis Hamilton. Thought that was just awesome. Loved that Bottas came back and is still leading the championship. That's great.
Oh, you know what? I've got another donkey of the race.
Who?
The awards robot.
Oh my gosh.
Probably
Don't
not
get me
something. You
started.
loved the weekend. You loved what Sergio did. You loved what Lewis did. Did you love how the awards were given away?
Why would we do that? You got team members standing right next to each other with masks and gloves on. Just go up and hand them the damn trophy and put a mask on. Good grief.
Gloves
We-
even. Put
gloves.
Even
Come
show
on.
the gloves going on before you pick up the trophy. But the
put
trophy
him
robot,
in a
no.
bubble suit. Just hand the trophy. This is just.
Or at least bring it down from, one of those helicopter things or something.
Yeah.
Drop it on them.
Yeah, just bring it
make
down
a
on a
bouncing
cable.
award or something.
Oh my gosh! Really? We got to have these little robot podiums? No, I said on Twitter. If that's what we're gonna do, then as soon as the third one hands the trophy, it should turn into battle bots. And we just fly around and hit each other. Which one will? Let's make it fun instead of just going over there and stopping short and
God.
making you come off the podium to get this.
As I said, it just reminded me of Dr. Evil and his little robotic
chair.
chair that kind of has its own
Yeah.
mind. It's like, I
Exactly.
couldn't believe that. I mean, it's annoying. I get the face mask thing. It's an image thing, but there's a point where it's not actually doing anything.
You've overthought it.
Can we just take the masks off, keep everyone 10, 15 apart, use a I don't know what you want to use, but let's not have, what'd you say? I don't know.
What?
Oh, sorry, we can figure it out. It's like, oh my God, just keep them far enough away so you can take the damn mask off and we can see the person talking and we can actually hear what they're saying.
I know. It's kind of like, they're standing 6 foot away. Okay, fine. You've got a microphone, stand back 20 foot, ask the damn question, and I can see actually Lewis smile.
Yeah, it's like all the drivers are like, they're like, I think he asked me about my race, so I'll just say something about the race, right? But it's just,
it's like, Lance, how'd that race go?
Yes.
I want it now! What's the matter with those twats down there?
Grief.
Stop it before I say stop it again.
I know. All right. Well, that does it for this podcast. We'll be back. I'm going to be remote. I can't guarantee it's going to be video, and apologies for that, but this one is video. I have to say a huge shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. We couldn't and wouldn't do this without you at all. Huge thank you. Skip is kicking my butt in the Fantasy GP game already. Already.
He was laying something down on Twitter. I didn't check to see where he was.
Man,
I know
he's talking
I dropped
smack.
a few spots, but
I think I'm on like in the 3rd page or something.
I'm still on page 1 at least.
You are, I know. So we've got the Kingsbridge BCP Fantasy GP game. If you're not joined up, you got to do that. You can check us out at Fantasy GP, and Skip has a super cool landing page with all of the top results at Kingsbridge BCP. It's awesome. They're such a good partner for us, and it's been great that he's doing that. So if you guys, we got to take the fight to Skip, man. He was the champion last year. We got to go after him. And that's the gauntlet's down. All right, be sure to stop by the website, theparcfermé.com. Share your opinions. Just do it to decorum civility. If you like the podcast, go over to iTunes. Give us a good rating. Give us a little love over there. We'd appreciate that. If you really like the podcast, why not just promote it? Tell your friends about it and share it on social media. We'd appreciate that as always. And until next week, until Paul and I come back to do this again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.